Now, our professor guest tonight is one of the world's most prominent and controversial philosophers. He penned the foundational text of the animal liberation movement, and his class on practical ethics is one of the most popular on campus. We are so excited to have him on the show that we've actually slaughtered the fattened cow. Please welcome Peter Singer. Thanks for coming out.
Good. It's a pleasure to be with you. There are actually people out the back there?
Yeah, the lighting's a little weird today. So how did you actually become an ethicist? Were you just like a really nice kid?
I was a really nice kid who strayed into doing philosophy. And some parts of philosophy are things like, is there really a desk here? Or
there is.
Perhaps I'm... Maybe there's a demon who has put these illusions into my head. Maybe even you're the demon. And
Adam can go with that.
right. And so, that's an interesting debate, and it goes back, there's all these philosophers who discuss how we can know that there really is an external world outside our brain. But in the end, when you talk about that, while it's interesting, it's not going to make a lot of difference to the world, is it? You're still going to act as if there is a desk there. And so after a while I thought, well, that's fun, but I'd rather do something that might make a difference. And ethics is the part of philosophy that connects with the real world.
Was there a certain, did you read a certain text or take a certain class and you were like, this is the moment, I have to do ethics now? Ethics.
So the class that got me interested was a sophomore class, as you would say in this country. We used to say second year back in Australia. And it was in ethics, and it was taught by a fairly conservative philosopher. It wasn't at all trendy. He taught us some of the great classics. And I actually didn't agree with his views at all, but he did give me something to argue against. And he had the great academic virtue that even if you didn't agree with him, if you argued well, you would end up with a good grade. He would encourage you to go on with the subject, and that's what I'm still doing.
So were you did you do bad things before you were an ethicist? I'm sure that everything you do now is totally, were you it's okay, you can admit it if you were in a gang?
No, I didn't do. I wasn't in a gang. I don't think my behaviour changed dramatically immediately. I think it sort of gradually, as I started to think more about ethics. So it was only when I was a graduate student actually that I started to think about the ethics of how we ought to treat animals, and decided that I couldn't justify continuing to eat them given the way they're produced in all sorts of horrible conditions. So I'd done ethics for what, 4 years or something before I really woke up to that, and now when I look back I think, gee, that's pretty dumb. I should have thought of that, but nobody was really talking about animals at the time. They seemed really so unimportant issue. Only things about humans really mattered, and so it took a little while. So I don't think that I was sort of particularly suddenly became more ethical, but I think thinking about some of these issues, I worked out some positions that were better than the ones that I grew up with.
So it's interesting then that when you were hired here, it actually caused a big stir. Some people see your ethical positions as very radical. Some people actually threaten to stop donating money to the university.
Steve Forbes in particular is, he was public about it.
Yes.
Mind you, he was running for the Republican nomination for president, so that might have been one reason why he was so public about it.
So do you have anything to say to those people through the amazing venue that we are
They're watching.
On YouTube. So I think actually, that was really an occasion in which President Harold Shapiro and the entire Board of Trustees, with the one exception that I've named, really did stand up for defending academic freedom. And that's what's tremendously important about great universities. Harold Shapiro probably didn't agree with all of the things that I think, and no doubt many of the other trustees didn't either. But they recognise that a great university is a place where you can encourage people to have controversial ideas as long as they're prepared to defend them by arguments and show why they hold these ideas and critique other ideas, and be open to criticism and discussion themselves. That's what we should all be about.
Did you get all that, Steve?
Yeah, we're talking to you. So you said that you sort of gradually became more ethically concerned over time. Have you ever found yourself in the place where you've been led to a position and then later you've regretted taking that certain ethical stance? For instance, one of the more controversial stances that you've said is that on occasion it could be permissible for there to be consensual sex between a man and an animal.
Well, look, maybe it wasn't the smartest thing to say. Given that I was already being criticised, there were obviously people looking around for some new reason to criticise me. What I actually was talking about in that was the fact that we have a prohibition on that that's a crime. And generally speaking, there are a lot of things that used to be crimes relating to non-reproductive sex, which we now don't think of as crimes at all. You just talked about the fact that, people can marry a partner of the same sex. Well, that not only used to be impossible to marry, it used to be a criminal offence, at least for men. Why not for women is a long story. But
none of us really have a firm grip on how lesbians.
The story is that when Disraeli would have had to explain it to Queen Victoria, he just couldn't come at it, so they dropped it. So one of the interesting questions is, why is that still a crime? Now, of course, some of the acts of human-animal sex are cruel to the animal, right? They're causing suffering, they're coercing the animal into something they would not do. But not every case need be like that. And the question is, well, if there's no cruelty involved, if the animal is a sort of willing participant, as willing as animals can be, then why should it be a crime? You may find it distasteful, you may find it weird or something like that.
Or great.
What is in your diary there? You didn't show us those pictures, did you?
There is a polecat I should introduce you to.
Oh my gosh. So what is the most interesting challenge to sort of your views that you've ever seen come from a student? Other than what we're really putting you through here. Really digging in deep.
But students challenge you all the time, I think, really. Students challenge you on a whole range of different views that you have. I don't know that there's one that's particularly been more interesting to me than any of the others, but students sometimes challenge you. I guess for me the most interesting ones are the ones where students want to go further than you do, right? I haven't actually had a Princeton student, I think, but I've been contacted by other students who've talked about donating a kidney to a stranger, right? We only need one kidney, really. Chances that you're going to need two are not very big. So there are people who've altruistically donated kidneys to strangers, and I'm going to have one of them speak to my practical ethics class in a few weeks. I find that very challenging. I still have two kidneys, so I'm not as ethical as I should be, I guess.
Apparently not.